Hey there folks, welcome to this video, and here I'm going to be talking about Formula 1. Now it is fair to say that the driver market in F1 is a bit of a harsh one. After all, you probably have around 30 top drivers and single-seaters looking to get into about 20 seats. This means that you have some of the best drivers out there not exactly finding their way into the sport. Now some of them will find drives elsewhere. You've got Formula E, you've got IndyCar. Some of them will also manage to find jobs in commentary or in presenting. However, what I want to explore in this video is a solution to this problem that means that you can get more drivers into Formula 1. And by looking at what might be a bit of a bizarre place, rallying, you can look at F1's solution to the driver market. Now, my brother had to listen to me talking about this, and he described it as part of
your whole ambition to make every sport WRC.
Now let's start off by having a look at what the WRC does. The WRC itself has a bit of a driver market issue. You could argue that out of the 10 or so drives that there are in the WRC, potentially up to 12, there are around 20 drivers that could actually end up in no seats. So what the WRC does is has a variety of different solutions. For example, Hyundai will enter multiple drivers into the championship, some of them on part-time contracts, which means you're able to end up with a lineup that consists of Thierry Neuville, Andreas Mikkelsen, Sebastian Loeb, Danny Sordo and Craig Breen, to name their 5 that they've entered into the 10 rounds so far this season. On the other hand, Citroën will do something like employ Mads Ostberg to compete in a support series such as WRC2 Pro. This is still a manufacturer drive, however it's not in the top flight, it's in a support series that showcases their car to customers looking to buy it. This means that while there are still many drivers vying for those top drives, they are still able to get involved in a championship somehow, either on a part-time deal or in one of the support series. However, there is an issue with this. The WRC has a point system, which means that teams can enter up to 3 crews nominated for an event. Out of these 3, the 2 highest scores will go on to the Manufacturers' Championship. This means that teams with a higher budget like Hyundai can enter in multiple different drivers and multiple different lineups, and then the top 2 at the end of the event will end up carrying forward the manufacturers' points. However, it also means that if you're Citroën, who are looking to have a smaller works effort, or M Sport, a private team with some works backing from Ford, you can enter 2 drivers full-time in the championship and still compete for the manufacturer's trophy. This means for bigger teams, they're able to rotate their driver lineups and give people part-time contracts so that they're more specialised for the events they enter in. For example, this weekend at Rally Germany, Hyundai have entered Thierry Neuville, Andreas Mikkelsen and Danny Sordo. However, they also have Sebastian Loeb in their roster, meaning they could enter him alongside Mikkelsen and Neuville in Sweden and Monte Carlo. There is also a bit of an issue where, because of the way they negotiated their contracts, Hyundai were able to enter both Sordo and Loeb as well as Neuville into events such as Corsica. However, that also opened up avenues in which Craig Breen managed to get an entry into Rally Finland. This is something historically tied to the WRC. In fact, until 2004, when as a kind of cost-cutting measure, teams were only allowed to enter 2 drivers into an event, you would see deals like what Peugeot had done. So for example, in the early noughties, especially in 2002 and 2003, Peugeot would have something like 4 contracted drivers, and in 2002 and 2003, these were Jules Panizzi, Harry Rovanperä on part-time contracts, and Marcus Grönholm and Richard Burns on full-time contracts. This meant they were able to rotate the drivers depending on which surfaces they were more specialised for. Panizzi, for example, would get more tarmac drives, and Rovanperä would get more gravel drives. However, it was something that still happened in later championships. Skoda, for example, were able to make sure that they were surviving as a smaller manufacturers team by having up to 7 drivers in the 2005 championship. However, due to the way that F1 itself is set up, this can't really apply. In F1, a team is expected to field 2 drivers for the whole season, and more or less keep the same lineup. It's almost impossible for you to buy a one-off entry or any kind of entry into the championship, unless a parent team is buying it, a sponsor is buying it, or your literal dad bought the whole team. However, there is a workaround. Smaller rally championships like the WRC2 or the European Rally Championship are designed for people to compete on a smaller budget, either teams or individual drivers. The way they do this is by having nominated rounds or, on the other hand, dropped scores. The European Rally Championship does this by having your top 6 events count towards what's eventually going to be your Drivers' Championship score. So they have 8 rounds in the championship, but the top 6 will carry over. So say if you didn't finish an event, you could then do another event, and then that would be your 6. The WRC2 does this on the other hand by having you nominate your 6 rounds ahead of a season. This can be changed if any kind of circumstances prevent it. For example, when Benito Guerra's car caught fire last season, he ended up being able to change the kind of events that he was entered in because he had to find a new car. Now this is something the Formula 1 can do, and let's talk about how. So let's start off with a hypothetical calendar. So next year we're rumoured to have 22 rounds. Each team will enter 2 cars into these events, which means they have a maximum of 44 entries. So if you say restrict a driver's points haul to their best 15 rounds, there are different ways that teams could tackle this. For example, if you're not guaranteed to score at every single round, you might field a driver for all 22 events. This means that if they are going to score in, say, 14 rounds, you're not going to lose out by having them only have their best 15 count. However, if you're a team like Red Bull or Ferrari or Mercedes, where you're more than likely guaranteed to get a points haul, you might end up splitting it and mixing and matching, because at the end of the day this affects your team's championship as well as the driver's championship. So you might hire 3 drivers, and you'd potentially split them something like 15, 15 and 14. And what you could do is have this third driver act almost as a reserve, as a backup. That means if you are Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton doesn't finish a race, either because of something like a crash or the engine fails, you might be able to make that third driver more flexible. Maybe they don't do all 14 rounds of their contract, maybe they only do 13, maybe they do 12, maybe they do less. So let's talk about how this would affect the grid. And let's start off with a big team, Mercedes. Mercedes are currently having this issue where they're deciding who's going to partner Lewis Hamilton next season, whether it's going to be Valtteri Bottas or Esteban Ocon. With this 3-driver solution, what they'd have is potentially a 3-driver split, so like I said, 15, 15 and 14. However, if Hamilton has had these issues and say he doesn't finish 1 or 2 races, you could enter him into a total of something like 17 races, so you'll have 17 point scoring finishes. Now who would bear the brunt of this? This would be decided on the form of the drivers. So say Bottas was in form, Ocon would take less drives. However, if Bottas was underperforming, he would lose out. For smaller teams, however, it would incentivise being able to have larger rosters and potentially more paid drivers. And for example, let's look at Alfa Romeo. Now, Alfa Romeo is known for having 2 roles kind of different within the team. So for example, Kimi Raikkonen serves as Alfa Romeo's own driver. However, Antonio Giovinazzi serves as a Ferrari junior driver. Now, what they could do is have these 2 do the 15 rounds. And in the 14 rounds, they give to a paid driver like Marcus Ericsson, who's currently their reserve driver. Likewise, if, for example, Giovinazzi was booted up to Ferrari because of this third driver system, they'd be able to have another Ferrari junior like Mick Schumacher. But it means that they're able to carry over the kind of driver that they want, a driver that they're going to have because of their partnership with Ferrari, and a driver they're going to have because they bring in sponsorship money like Ericsson. This could also really help backmarker teams. So for example, let's talk about Williams. They could enter a plethora of drivers into different events depending on sponsorship deals. So for example, remember how they had Martini as a title sponsor? Remember also that they had to take off Martini at certain events due to restrictions on alcohol. Similarly, they have restrictions on things like tobacco in different countries. Now, it might seem weird, but let's say, for example, Martini sponsors a driver. They could enter this driver into events where Martini were able to trade, and Martini would be able to go, this one, we're going to be able to have a driver because it might be more high profile. So, for example, they might want their driver to do Monaco. However, this driver wouldn't do something like Bahrain because restrictions mean that they can't actually have their name on the car. This could be something that would be quite interesting for Williams. Because of the fact they'd be able to have more paid drivers and more existing on sponsorship deals, they'd be able to end up coming in with more money. This bigger amount of money could go into developing the car, could go into keeping the team afloat, meaning they don't have to sell out to any kind of manufacturer or end up selling out to a massive sponsor. And let's end off by talking about what it could mean for F1. Firstly, in terms of raw amount of drivers, it could mean that there are 30 or more drivers in the championship, even if there are only 20 drives. It could also mean, potentially, that a title fight would be much closer, even if there is one team that's dominating, because if you have two closely matched teammates and one of them is only able to do 15 rounds, the other one's only able to do 15 rounds, you'd see teams mix and match. You'd see them pick their best drivers for their best events because they want their constructors to look the best. So even if you had a runaway season like Mercedes is supposedly having this time around, if they had 3 solid drivers who are always fighting for the race win, it could mean the title goes down to the wire. And finally, let's talk about having new teams join the sport, and especially new small independent teams. This could be an incentive for them to enter. The problem that they have is they don't think they have the funding to stay a whole season in Formula 1. Well, basically because of the fact that you have to enter 2 cars into every single event. If they're able to find enough paid drivers, they might be able to make up this kind of deficit and be able to fund themselves through a whole season. It means they're able to enter in all the events and don't have to worry about fines for missing the event. It could mean that we have even more teams on the grid, even more drives on the grid, and so on until we end up stimulating a massive driver market for Formula 1 where drivers can drive all around the grid and end up competing over a series of events. And well, that's my theory. It's not something that I've really seen many people talk about online, so I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments below. I think it would be a good idea, even if it would end up shaking up the formula of Formula 1. But then, I think that's the spirit of Formula 1. It's always meant to be kind of adaptive. We see all these rule changes happening all the time. But let's keep it constructive, let's keep it civil. Let's not just keep on calling people names and so on and so forth. And if you liked this video, even if you disagree with my conclusion, please hit the like button, because it's quite a bit of a task for me to do videos like this. So it's a good idea, if people like this style, for me to do more videos like this in the future. And if you do like this style and you're not subscribed yet, please do. It keeps people in the loop, and it also means that my channel gets more and more promoted, which, as I'm such a tiny little channel here, it really helps me connect to a bigger viewer base. And that's that. Thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.